In an accident at the Chernobyl power station,
people were injured and may have died.
People just haven't been told what dangers they may face.
Нічого ніхто не попереджав. Працювали школи, садочки.
Это, говорят, радиация не ощущается никак.
Он невидимый.
Подлетаем к блоку.
Все думали, что вот сейчас, как я бы говорил, бездумное решение.
Nuclear radiation had already reached Scandinavia.
The Chernobyl disaster, which occurred in the 1980s, is the worst nuclear accident in history. This disaster happened in the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant in Ukraine, and although it was initially concealed by the Soviet government, the magnitude of the disaster was so great that it affected all of Ukraine's neighboring countries. Chernobyl is located in Kyiv Oblast, the capital of Ukraine, near the border with Belarus. This city became uninhabitable due to an incident that occurred in the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant's fourth reactor, which was a type of RBMK reactor on April 26, 1986, almost 37 years ago. The Chernobyl nuclear accident can be considered one of the worst non-military nuclear disasters in world history. The use of nuclear energy has both advantages and disadvantages, but if it goes beyond human control, any oversight in this regard will have irreparable consequences for human health and the environment. An unintended nuclear expulsion or leakage of radioactive materials from damaged reactors can cause significant radioactive contamination and adverse effects. Most of us have heard some things about the Chernobyl disaster. At 1:24 a.m. on April 26, 1986, a colorful communist flame rose to 1,000 meters in the Ukrainian sky. The fourth reactor of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded, indicating that the Chernobyl battle had begun. Although many years have passed since this incident, stories are still being told in the West. They say that at that time, some people were standing on a bridge, watching the blue radioactive dust like snowflakes. That is why this bridge was called the Bridge of Death. And there were other stories that say all those people died, when in fact there was no such bridge, and most people were asleep at that time. Only those who were close to the accidents were treated, and only 20% of those who were exposed to radioaction were poisoned. It is here that some media outlets need to be questioned. The impact of radiation poisoning on the body is that it takes the electrons from individual atom molecules and destroys chemical bonds, resulting in damage to body tissues. You don't even need me to tell you that this is not good for the individual, and generally, after 1 or 2 hours, they experience diarrhea and vomiting. The individual's immune system is severely weakened, and without this immune system, many bacteria enter the body and eat away at you from the inside. This may take some time, and even if the person's body is covered with wounds and bandages, they may feel good after a few days, but after that, blood infection can cause deadly sepsis. One of the people in this city, named Lyudmila Ignatenko, was awake before the incident and saw a strange light in the sky, but her husband Vasily was fighting the fire at that moment. According to their own words, their child was supposed to be born in 2 months. A few days after the start of the Chernobyl story, Vasily was transferred to the hospital and his wife went to see him after a lot of searching. This meeting was their last and led to bitter future events. A few days later, Vasily dies due to a high infection and their child also dies due to heart failure and radiation poisoning after being born. At the time of the incident, when the firefighters were busy working, one of them jokingly said to his friend, "We should have an unbelievable amount of radiation on iodine here. If we are all alive in the morning, we're lucky." The survivors never told them that the reactors were still burning and they just wanted to put out the fire. On April 25th and 26th, 1986, the reactor operators deactivated the reactor safety system to conduct a test, resulting in a reactor without proper control and inspection. Without the ability to monitor the reactor, its temperature reached a level higher than the planned output. At 10:11 p.m. on April 26, 1986, the Chernobyl power plant received an order to reduce the reactor's power level for testing purposes and started to lower the fourth reactor power by 30%. In the meantime, two catastrophic errors occurred. The first error happened when the reactor supervisor mistakenly reduced the power of the reactor by 1% due to the improper adjustment of neutron-absorbing rods, causing the reactor to experience a more significant power drop than intended. Here, the personnel made their second mistake and pulled almost all of the control rods out of the reactor, similar to accelerating and braking a car simultaneously. At 1:24 a.m., the initial explosion lifted the 1,000-ton cover of the reactor, releasing a large amount of hot steam. This was a prelude to the second explosion caused by hydrogen, which may have resulted from the combination of steam from the broken pipes and zirconium or even graphite from the reactor core. The second explosion destroyed the reactor's roof and wiped out 25% of the nuclear plant's facilities. The burning graphite and hot nuclear materials spilled from the explosion caused approximately 30 new fires, including the flammable asphalt roof of Unit 3 adjacent to Unit 4, where the explosion occurred. At 3 a.m., local authorities had already arrived to discuss the incident, but they were not told the whole truth because only a handful knew that the reactor had exploded, and many had died in the plant. Anatoly Dyatlov, the deputy chief of the nuclear power plant, still believes that only a water tank exploded, and he cannot believe the truth. At 4 a.m., more firefighters arrived to help extinguish the fires. The last thing anyone wants is for Reactor 3 to catch fire, which seems like a possibility and will likely to be put out soon. However, Reactors 1 and 2 continue to operate as usual. In Reactor 4, there is a molten core and a large burning graphite at the temperature of about 1200 degrees Celsius. At 5 a.m., another meeting is held with experts. Some ask about the high radiation levels, and a theory is proposed that the nuclear core has exploded. Dyatlov dismisses it as nonsense, although it is not entirely implausible. It is then decided that no news should leak out. All phone lines are blocked, and if anyone starts spreading rumors, it will have negative effects on the Soviet government. At 7 a.m., most of the fires are put out, but this is by no means the end of the problems, and it is just the beginning. Valery Legasov, the deputy director of the Atomic Energy Institute, and Kucharov, who leads the commission and investigating of the incident, testify in court and reveal the shortcomings of the Soviet Union in nuclear energy production. At 8 a.m., they call Legasov, who quickly meets with Boris Shebernia, who was responsible for crisis management in Chernobyl at the airport. They still do not know exactly what happened. When they attend a meeting to discuss the issues, it is early noon. Legasov had seen the people who had been burned due to radiation exposure and knew the city had to be evacuated as soon as possible without exception. The second atomic explosion, due to large chain reactions, was 10 times stronger than Hiroshima and threatened to not only wipe out all of Ukraine, but half of Europe from the face of the earth at any moment. Europe was on the brink of a disaster. This incident is considered the most expensive event in history, costing over $200 billion. Many employees and firefighters who were working without protection were mostly at the start of the fire on roof of Unit 3, which they ignored safety predictions. Some of those who were hospitalized reached 108 by 6 a.m. and 132 by the end of the first day. After the explosion, the surrounding environment of the facilities was contaminated with radioactive waves, and gradually, rain caused large parts of Europe to become contaminated with radioactive materials. As a result of the explosion in the reactor of Block 4 in the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant, radioactive materials were released to build about 100 atomic bombs. Although in that year, the former Soviet Union authorities severely prohibited the spread of any news about this disaster, compared to human societies, the Chernobyl disaster is the most terrible technological disaster in all of human history. Despite 37 years passing since this disaster, about 9 million people live in contaminated areas of Chernobyl, and English experts predict that about 66,000 more people will lose their lives due to cancer caused by the Chernobyl nuclear power plant explosion in the coming years. The initial explosion led to the death of 2 workers, but 28 firefighters and workers who cleaned up the reactor only 3 months after the incidents lost their lives due to illness caused by radioactive radiation and heart failure. All residents of the city of Pripyat, with a population over 49,000, located within 3 kilometers of the nuclear power plant, were evacuated within 36 hours of the incidents. In the weeks and months that followed, 67,000 people were relocated to places designated by the government. In total, nearly 200,000 people were forced to relocate due to the Chernobyl disaster. The psychological effects of the Chernobyl incident continues to this day. Immediately after the incident, there were many suicides. Many people became addicted to alcohol and depression increased. More than 100 radioactive elements entered the area of the Chernobyl explosion. Of course, most of these elements had a short half-life and quickly lost their radioactivity. Iodine, zirconium, and cesium were the most dangerous elements released. As iodine causes thyroid cancer, zirconium also causes leukemia or blood cancer. Scandinavian countries and other parts of the world were affected by radioactive radiation. The Chernobyl incident was nearly 400 times stronger than the bomb that exploded in Hiroshima. Although atomic bombs that were detonated experimentally by various countries in the 1960s and the 1970s released 100 to 1,000 times more radioactive material into nature than Chernobyl. On December 15, 2000, the last reactor that was operating in Chernobyl was shut down, and the decommissioning project began. Currently, there are 3 inactive reactors in Chernobyl, and the time planned for their cleanup project is several decades. This project is being supervised by the Ukrainian government, and the International Atomic Agency will also help Ukraine by providing engineering, planning, and consulting services. The fate of the 4th reactor, which caused the 1986 incident, is still unknown. In 2019, HBO produced a miniseries called Chernobyl based on this disaster, which quickly gained popularity and reached the top ranking of the 250 best TV series in the world on IMDb after the 3rd episode was aired.
All of the good we did, it doesn't matter. What does matter is that to them, justice was done. See, a just world is a sane world. There was nothing sane about Chernobyl.